Hey everyone. Last patch for TFT 11.21. This is the last patch of set 5 before we move on to set 6. Set 6 just went up on the PBE, so I know a lot of people are playing it. I'm gonna still play a little bit of set 5, see if I can make my way back to Diamond and be all the awesomeness that I am. Still need a little bit of work on that part. But I'll put some more time into it. I'll probably talk more about the PBE next week, and from what I've seen, what looks kind of awesome, and what you need to know going into it. But for now, let's talk about this final patch that we have. Quick patch highlights. Major changes. So this is actually new, because this wasn't on the note sheet that Mort usually gives out over the weekend. Mystic Magic Resistance. There's been a buff to Mystic Magic Resistance at Mystic. This should be 3, should be 2, 3, 4. So this should be 4 Mystic. Um, I'm not surprised. I don't think anyone really plays higher tiers of Mystic. There's not a lot of incentive unless you know you're up against a Heimerdinger or a Teemo or a Karma or a Vel'Koz. And in those particular cases, it's probably not really good against either Teemo or Heimer because they'll just blow you out anyway through all of this magic, especially Heimer. Archangel's Heimer can pretty much blow you out regardless of what your Mystic is. But it is getting a little bit of buff. I don't think I ever really see anyone go up to 4 Mystic. I didn't even know 5 Mystic was a thing. Tier 3 unit changes. So Misfortune 3 getting a little bit of a nerf. It's a pretty powerful build if you get good items. But you really do need to get good items for it. Zyra 3 is also getting a nerf. The main reason why Zyra 3 is getting a nerf is because Zyra 3, given optimized items, is usually better than a Heimer 2. Sometimes, I should say, it should be specific. Sometimes better than a Heimer 2, almost always better than a Vel'Koz 2, and probably better than a Karma 2. So, that probably shouldn't be the case. Should be competitive, but not, like, outright better. Tier 4 champions, Lucian. Sentinel got nerfed. I believe Lucian's AP damage got nerfed, so they're putting a little bit more back in to make that comp a little better. I don't think this really needed to happen, and I don't think anyone's really going to notice. Vel'Koz is getting a nerf at 1 and 2 star. I can understand it. Vel'Koz really doesn't need a lot of AP items to really pop off at times. Especially Vel'Koz. Vel'Koz 1's like very, very, very strong. So I'm very, very not surprised to see this. That said, the Vel'Koz 2, it's a pretty minor nerf, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. But the nerf to Vel'Koz 1's fairly significant, I think. Especially if you don't have strong enough AP damage items. Tier 5 champions. Akshon. So Akshon's getting a health reduction. The thing with Akshon is because he has Ranger, or if you give him a Rage Blade, he becomes like kind of untargetable. In fact, I believe that's exactly what they said. With less health, he'll be punished when foes do retarget him. He's very difficult to hit, particularly because he's a ranger, so he can get that random attack speed bonus. But also, Rage Blade's been a very common item to give to him, so he'll just spam out his attacks. He'll do his spinny thing, and I believe those attacks are considered auto attacks for Rage Blade. So he'll get even more attack speed during his ult while he's spinning around. In general, this makes Akshan really, 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 really hard to kill. He's often always the last thing anyone ever kills, and he's already got backline access. So in that way, he's a lot like Set 3 Shaco, and with aggro job and just annoyed everyone. Um, so they're lowering his health total in the end. Lowering his health total make him a little easier to kill, particularly when retargeted. Good change. Akshon's like really good. Kayle, third ascension immunity every 15th auto attacks, now every 12. Final ascension damage has been buffed at 1 and 2 star. Kayle kind of fell off, probably for two reasons. frontline tanks have gotten weaker and weaker as the set has gone along, and also they nerfed Kayle's primary combo of Deathblade and Rageblade. Those two items are like her best items. They probably still are her best items, but they pulled a lot of the damage out from what those items would be useful for, and just like gave it straight damage. Um, this should make Kayle better. I just don't know by how much. That said, this is a pretty significant boost here from 25 to 150. I do think this makes Kayle way better, but it's still kind of the same deal with Kayle. Does your frontline hold out long enough for her to blow up the entire battlefield? That's in the end all Kayle comes down to, just buying time for Kayle to wind up and nuke the field. Smaller changes, A-bomb scaling has been decreased. Mid-game A-bomb is pretty good. Late game A-bomb kind of meh. Early game A-bomb kind of meh. So this isn't like really that surprising to me to see. The mid game is where A-bomb tends to be a little too strong and lets people freely get to like a Heimerdinger or a Vel'Koz a little too easily, I think. Legionnaire, I'm surprised this change wasn't done earlier. It's kind of a little known fact because you don't see it that often, but Legionnaire 4 in the early game when you get like a Riven, so you get an early Riven and you have like an Aatrox, Kalista, and maybe and an Aurelia. Like you throw those three out on the field, and it's actually really strong. Aatrox becomes nearly unkillable, and Riven just kind of blows up everything she runs into. Um, it's a very strong early composition that you don't see too often. So I'm happy to see this tiny little nerf. Even though this looks tiny, it's actually pretty significant. Um, it, Legionnaire 4, while kind of awkward to play, is makes up for it in a lot of the scaling that it has on the stats, particularly attack speed. Sentinel 9 gets a buff. As you can tell from the scaling of Sentinel attack speed bonus, um, no one ever goes 9, because if they did, they would see something insane, and it's being buffed. So I don't think this does anything, because I don't think anyone goes Sentinel 9. Sentinel 9 is definitely too janky to play. In my, off the top of my head, it seems incredible janky to try to function and get out onto the field. I don't know what your comp looks like. Like you would have to have probably Sentinel. You would have to play every single Sentinel, and then you'd probably have a Sentinel spat on top of Oh wow, Aphelios. Probably Aphelios. Maybe. Maybe Garen. I don't know. I don't know how you do this. Poppy Buckler getting a buff at 3-star. Yeah, sure, whatever. Syndra buff at 3-star. Yeah, sure, whatever. Gwen 3 Stips now will have a much larger radius. Cool. Heimerdinger damage upgrade. 1 starts getting a tiny buff. Remember what I said about Zyra? A lot of people do not transition off Zyra into Heimer because Heimer 1 kind of just tickles. This is not a lot of damage. Like even if you start putting a bunch of AP items on him, it's still not a lot of damage. So this buff was probably warranted. He might actually kill something now. But the big buff is when you get here and when you have an Archangels and you get multicast. Gizmos and gadgets. I'll talk about this next week. I think I'll do a video where I go through. I'll probably just go through the traits and what the carries look like from some of the gameplay footage that I've seen. I'm going through some of the gameplay footage. I'm not really watching much of the Twitch streaming because, as you can guess right now, everything's down. But I'll go through some and kind of report back to you what I've seen, what is interesting. The set looks very open. I think there's going to be a lot of innovation, a lot of ways to play this set. It's probably going to look a lot more like Fates than it is, so set 4, than any other set, but even more insane. Imagine if you had 2 Chosens instead of 1. Or, no, 3 Chosens. Yeah, let's go with 3 Chosens. You get 3 Chosens instead of 1, and just think of the level of innovation that you'd have to do in order to win games in that style. Bug fixes Gwen. Yeah, there's separate roles for crits and her damage. No, I'm not sure why. I think it's because her attack's like considered a spell. It's probably something along those lines, but they fixed it. They happen simultaneously. All right. Talk about the patch quickly. The main buff here is probably to Kayle. You'll probably see a good bit more Kayle so long as you can provide a sufficient front line. Meanwhile, on the nerf side, Akshan is somewhat weaker. I don't think on the nerf side anything's going to have too much of an impact, except for maybe the Zyra 3 and Vel'Koz 1. You probably will hold off on Vel'Koz till you get Vel'Koz 2. But otherwise, I'm not expecting too much in terms of meta change, with like exception probably Kayle. But that's it for this video. I'll go ahead and post it up, and I'll get back to you guys next week with my thoughts on what the new set looks like and kind of give you some ideas of how to play, what to look for. See ya.